I'm Ben Sebastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 9, Episode 48 interview. We'll be talking with Dale Corvino and discussing his recent work, or his upcoming work, Afterlife of a Kept Boy. So if you haven't seen his first interview, let's get to know our guest. Recipient of the 2023 C&R Press Nonfiction Award and a 2021 Lambda Literary Emerging Fellow, Dale Corvino found his voice at the underground literary salon Dean Johnson's Reading for Filth. In 2018, he won the Gertrude Press Fiction contest, judged by Whiting Award recipient Brontez Purnell. Recent nonfiction includes a profile of Chilean writer Pedro Lemebel? Did I pronounce that right?
Lemebel. Yeah.
Nice. For the Gay Lesbian Review, an essay on queer longing in the digital era for Matt Keegan's 1996, and a chapter in the Routledge Handbook of Male Sex Work, Culture and Society, Bonds and Boundaries. His debut short story collection was released in 2023 from Rebel Satori Press. That's what we talked about last time. Dale, welcome back with your new book.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me back, guys. It was fun last time, and it's going to be fun this time.
It sure will. So, I know we talked a bit about where the passion was to write, but you've taken a different tack this time and you've written a memoir.
Yes, I have. And the truth is, this memoir has been in the making for decades because even when I was going through the experiences which I account for in this memoir, I was not steadily, but intermittently diary keeping
Hmm.
with the notion that I need to put this down so I can account for what's happening to me. And also, like, a lot of the diary keeping that I did during some of these periods that are outlined in the memoir, it was very much like a survival tactic to, like, I need to write this down.
Was was
Yeah,
it so that you could investigate your emotions, or was it more of a check on what your actions were?
it was some of the things that were happening that I was experiencing were beyond the scope of my understanding,
Mm.
even if I wasn't fully aware of that, and I just needed to get them down.
Right. All right. So
So it's been
decades in the
interesting
making.
yeah, it's been interesting to revisit, like, the trail of diary entries that go back. I think the earliest one goes back to 86 when I was like a sexually confused college student, and my very first encounter with the person with whom I would have this entanglement with, which is the topic of the first half of the book, who was a a very aristocratic British society decorator from the Upper Side. And, you know, over a period of time, through a period of, like, slow disclosures, I became what I later understood to be his kept boy, and he became my sugar daddy.
Did
So yeah,
you did you use those terms at the time?
there's a scene in the book where a woman of our acquaintance calls me that to
Okay.
a group of her friends at a charity event. And it was like kind of the first recognition that that's the role that I was fulfilling. And she kind of brushed it off, was like, because I overheard it. I don't think I was supposed to overhear it. I overheard it. And she was like, oh, don't sweat it. This has been going on for centuries. And she kind of put it in context for me, in a context that I really didn't fully understand. It's a little bit of that frog in boiling water kind of deal where, like, I
You
was
don't realize.
I was gradually, lured into this entanglement, and I definitely had some agency and some complicity in it, but still, I was, like, probably too naive and too young and too sexually confused to fully understand what I was getting into.
Right. Does the moment of awakening and understanding signify the shift in the book?
No, the shift is actually, like, the first half of the book is a pretty linear chronicle of the decade or so I spent as a kept boy with this British society decorator who was referred to mostly as the decorator. And the shift is really after his death,
Okay.
because at that point I felt like I was free,
Hmm.
but it actually took a lot of to really get free of like the effects of his romantic obsession and that the fact that I sort of um, licensed out my 20s, like 20s being very formative years, especially for queer people, right? And
Hmm.
I was kind of in this gilded cage for all of my 20s. So the shift is really like the first half is a fairly linear presentation of like, this is what happened, and then he died. This is how I met him. The opening scene is our encounter, which happened on Fifth Avenue in New York City. I was kind of aimlessly wandering home from school, and my college roommate at the time stopped traffic on Fifth Avenue and was yelling for me to come meet this man from the back seat of this guy's Jaguar, while his chauffeur was just like, can we just move this along? Because he was stuck in traffic and the horns were blaring.
Sure.
To the end, which is his death in a hospital room of basically largely the effects of alcoholism. So the second part is really like, I consider the first part like hewing to solar time. It's very like,
I was going to ask
eh,
about the styles.
yeah, like it's very like the beat is very relentless because I was for most of that time I felt like I was under this man's obsessive gaze. And then the second part I consider more lunar time because it's more like phases of my life where in each phase I came to shed or free myself or try some aspect of my experience with him.
Nice. So jumping back to the first part for just a second, and I
Sure.
only do this because I don't know how much of our youth culture understands the concept of kept boy. You were
Right.
you were basically his to control, right? I mean, he decided who you got to spend time with.
Well, and this is how it started also. This was like the pot and the frog in the boiling water. Like
Hmm.
I was a I was a design student going to college, and he was an interior designer. So I proposed working for him as a kind of draftsman or what have you, an assistant.
Hmm.
And we did kind of start on those terms, but we ended
Okay.
up on his terms, which were he needed a dinner companion and somebody to drink with and somebody to go out to dinner with. And I was put on a stipend, so I had like a weekly stack of cash put in my pocket.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that I was fully in his control,
Okay.
but like the lure of large sums of cash on a weekly basis, kept me coming
Right.
back.
Right.
Hmm.
So I don't like to represent this as a narrative of victimization.
Okay.
I do think it's a lot more I think that the real story is a lot more nuanced. Like through a contemporary lens, you might say like people are like, okay, this th was there consent or was it, consent is, I think people are trying to put forth a notion of consent,
Hmm.
which is very like cut and dry. Like, yes, you may touch me there. Yes,
Hmm.
you may do the next thing. And it's in my experience, at least in the 80s, it wasn't quite like that. It was
Right.
like it was a slope. And I I definitely need to tell the story correctly. I definitely need to own my own complicity in it, but
Hmm.
also, there were a series of deceptions that took place. I won't reveal them all because
Well, no. So what the book is for.
some of them would be spoilers, yes, but there
Right.
were a series of I was operating under a series of deceptions.
All right. So part two, the unpacking of the phases.
Yes.
Where did that begin?
That begins with me inheriting a bunch of money from this gentleman and freaking the hell out because I was like, in my mind, I was free and everything was going to be great and I had all this money. But also, I didn't know how to live with myself because I hadn't, as an adult, lived much without being in his orbit.
Hmm.
So I tried to figure things out. I tried not to spend all the money. I spent a lot of it, but I tried not to spend it all. And I also had to deal with my own addiction, which I had kind of cultivated at his side. I was like, I was like I feel like I almost like in AA terms, I feel like I had a sponsor in alcoholism because like
Ooh,
I was literally paid to drink for 10 years. And
right.
when it became intolerable for me to show up to my job, I turned to drugs. So I had a I started a business, and within the first year, I bottomed out on my own alcohol and drug addiction and got sober. So that's maybe like the first phase of
Wow.
reckoning with what I had been through in my 20s. The second phase was after a kind of like after that business closed and after a kind of uh, a big like recession in New York where I found myself basically unemployable. I started I and it was also at the advent of the internet age, right? So
Hmm.
there's also a split in the book between like the analog era and the digital era. I started to undertake by the hour sex work. And compared to being a kept boy, where I really felt like I was in a kind of cage, like a
Hmm.
an elegant cage, but I was kind of caged. I found the experience of by the hour sex work really liberating. Like I was able to set my terms. I was able to like um understand my value in a way. And, people always say like there's this kind of melodramatic thing you hear a lot when you talk to people about sex work. It's the one that makes me laugh the most, which is like people say like, how could you sell your body? And my answer to that is it's more of a rental and you just have to set your terms.
Right.
So after 3 years of being like a fairly successful escort in New York City on the internet in the earliest days of, well, fairly early days of the internet, it was largely through AOL chat rooms. I I moved on to a corporate job. So that was another phase where I felt like sex work helped me to like recover my sexuality and my agency in my sexuality
Hmm.
that I had like lost or or had been forestalled during my kept boy period.
Was there a phase after that?
Yes, there are a couple more phases after
Okay.
that where one involves like me starting to um like um kind of I guess socialize in a more normative like have friends and I point to like my friendship with this guy, the guy in this photo, Dean Johnson, who is also in encouraging me to write and read my stories. So it's it's kind of like setting myself as a now sober person in a social context, and also starting to write and bring my writing to the public. And then
Nice.
also another phase was a reckoning I had with the person I call the instigator,
Is
whose
this
name,
the one
whose
who said,
name,
"Come over to the Jaguar"?
yes, the
Okay.
person who was my college roommate who I call Andres in the book. That is a pseudonym because the person uh, that actual person did not want to be identified by his real name, and he's still among us. And he's living his own fabulous afterlife in South America right now. He was kind of like this person who I was kind of like really enthralled with when he moved into my apartment. He had this, wild life. He was wearing all these fabulous clothes, going to all these fabulous parties, and I came to learn that it was like his whole lifestyle as a putatively as a college student, but also as just like a wild party boy on the scene, was financed by sex work.
Hmm.
And he had kind of lured me into this relationship with the decorator to kind of like help him, you know, help his trade. So years after all that went down, and years after our own entanglement, I went down to South America and like visited with him and sought a kind of reckoning with him, like as far as like, can we account for what we've been through as as two people? And it didn't exactly go as planned. It wasn't the reckoning I was looking for, but I guess it was the reckoning I needed.
Okay.
And that happened to be it was in Santiago, Chile, and it happened to be during one of the largest popular uprisings in the world. So it was a very fraught period for us to kind of to have a reckoning and also to like reconnect. But it was pretty intense, and it was like I said, it did bring me some closure.
Nice.
Yeah.
All
And then
right.
the final kind of phase of my reckonings was with some of the people I encountered uh, during the 3 years I was a full-time sex worker. Because a lot of them are just like, in the moment, and when you're doing work, they're just kind of like names, pseudonyms, or like profile names that you don't know. But there were real people behind some of these names, and they had a real impact on my life.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like finding some closure with some of those people as well.
Nice. Do you find overall the process of writing a memoir has helped you with a lot of closure?
Absolutely. And also like landing on this particular structure, this two-part structure, like first section told in solar time, second section told in lunar time,
Hmm.
really helped me to understand my story better because um I think if I explained it in the past, it all came out a kind of like confused jumble. And also like people respond to specific terms. Like I could say, I could say to one of my friends, like, "Oh, that's my sugar daddy," and they wouldn't quite believe it, or it wouldn't quite land the
Hmm.
way. But so I found I had to do some unpacking of those terms in the text and how they came to be and how they came to land on me and this other person. And then also like um to understand it as two phases or two distinct periods where time beat differently for me, it was also very helpful because I I think that is true to my experience. And it also has something to do with the frictions between analog time and digital time.
Mm.
Absolutely. Did you have questions, Bess?
No, I'm fascinated because, one of my all-time literary heroes is John Rechy, who was a sex worker himself and wrote some of the
Yeah,
most prosaic level of literary writing on the subject. So I just
yeah,
find it interesting when you run into someone else, such as yourself, who's gone through that whole thing and then gone through the process of actually cathartically writing it out.
sure.
And I just find it really fascinating to hear another perspective in the same area. And I want to congratulate you for doing it because a lot of people
Thank
may
you.
have done it, but then don't necessarily want it broadcast that they were doing
Sure.
it.
Hmm.
And so there's a level of courage that has to be acknowledged in taking what still in this society which is ridiculous when you think of how long sex work has been going on, that here we are, some 5,000 years later, and we still can't deal with the subject.
Yeah, there's still stigma, and you're absolutely right. Like, first of all, Reshi, I think, has a very important, place in literature. Like when I did that Routledge project, I surveyed all the contemporary lit that touched on male sex work, and he's definitely part of the canon. I do think sometimes he could have used an editor, but that's an aside.
Yeah, I find what he was really good at was that he was very evocative in
Yeah, it was
his
like
prose.
he's very evocative, and he was also kind of framed by the literary establishment as this kind of raw,
Right. It was a
right from the
movement. It
streets
was part of
talent.
that movement at
Right,
that time. Yeah. Yeah.
right.
And I found that sometimes he could go on certain things that were very Anne Rice, where Anne Rice would, it's about vampires, but then she would get caught up in the the weft and warp of a curtain for like 4 pages, and you just go, okay, Anne, let's move it along.
Yeah. But his descriptions of like the cruising scenes
Hmm.
in the hills of Los Angeles are fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
I would have died. I would have
Um,
killed to actually have taken one of his classes. I thought
yeah.
that must have been really intense.
And a lot of the depictions in literature they come from, they're not coming from the worker. They're coming from the clients or the trade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And or sometimes I find that a lot of narratives that involve sex workers, the sex worker doesn't have like emotional gravity, or he or she doesn't have like they're kind of props or narrative devices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to do that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no,
I
and
wanted,
that's a
yeah,
really
I wanted to center the worker experience and have like two different aspects of worker experience.
yeah. And I think that that's what's commendable about what you're doing here, because
Mhm.
it's giving us a different flavor
Yeah,
than the way that Retchie and some of the others have done. I think the whole Violet Quill gang of that era, that movement, was to be as visceral as possible.
yeah,
And because it was something really, really bold for the time, I mean, a lot of the children nowadays would find it probably very mild mannered in comparison to the shit that we get up on in YouTube and on the all the social webs. But in our day, this stuff was ground shattering.
right. I no doubt. Yeah. I came to Recce much later, but I did revisit. I saw you talk about Violet Quill. I saw Andrew Holleran at
Oh,
Saints and Sinners in March. In fact, we took a long bus ride back from downtown New Orleans to the airport and just had a like whole kiki on the bus. And I was on a
Nice.
panel with him, and I talked about the fact that um, his best known novel, help me guys, I'm blanking on the name,
Dancer from
Fire
the Dance.
Island, Dancer from the Dance. So the whole Dancer in the Dance is so well known for capturing a moment in Fire Island history and the hedonism and the
Mm-hmm.
sexiness
Mm-hmm.
and all that. But if you read the opening pages, it's actually a New York-based young man who like delves into sex work because he's broke and needs money.
Right.
And it's his text. Like he wrote the text we think of when we think of Dancer from the Dance. That's his novel. So I find that really interesting. And I pointed that out I was like, I didn't include Dancer from the Dance in the index of like representations of sex workers in modern lit, but it really does belong in the canon. So I really
Yeah.
appreciated the way Holleran handled it
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
book. Yeah. Another book that's come out, that's fairly recent is Greenwell's What Belongs to You. And I find it beautifully written, but also the sex work character, it is a little bit of sexual tourism, and the sex work character is quite flat.
Mm,
He's basically a narrative device. Like
mm.
the American couple, like has this experience and then they're unchanged by their encounter with sex work,
Mm,
Mm.
mm,
Interesting.
essentially.
okay.
All right.
I
S-
know, I know he's like the literary darling right now, but if you read it from a sex worker perspective, it's a little stereotyping.
Interesting. Good to know. So back to your work. It is up for pre-order now
It
at
feels like we did a
crpress.org.
sideline whole thing on here's a review of Violet
No,
Quill
well,
by
no,
other authors. No, I mean, we went
I
down that
I
rabbit hole together.
I
I mean,
appreciate it though.
honestly, like, yes, Afterlife of a Catboy is available for pre-order from
There you
C&R
go.
Press. You
There
can
you
go to the
go.
link, and it's shipping in March. And
Hmm.
but I'm offering my perspective as an avid reader, like
Hmm.
because I got that assignment from Routledge, and also because I've been reading a lot of recently published memoir as a judge for the Lammies for the last couple of years. Not necessarily sex work themes, but just like memoir.
Mm.
I've really become a kind of like very dedicated reader of as many of the sex work themed works in modern literature, especially male sex work. I mean,
Right.
there's a whole other canon for ladies and trans folks, but yeah, I have to interpret it the way I see fit.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else you want folks to know about your novel or the genre in general before we move on to our get to know you questions?
The memoir.
Yeah.
Um, um,
Oh, you had an
um,
excerpt to share.
oh yeah. Here's the thing. Talking about representations of sex work, there's a whole section, a short section in the memoir where I reckon with American Gigolo, the film, right? Because American Gigolo came out when I was like 16 years old, so it was
Mhm.
R-rated. So I was like too young to see it, and like I didn't summon the courage to sneak into the movie theater to see it. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I probably would have made some really bad style choices. Did Blondie. It was like
Mhm.
be Harry's siren vocals. It was like this driving beat. It, and I write about this too. It kind of returned to me in a lot of erotically charged situations. And also, when I was finally ready to shed the Catboy label, I summoned one of the lyrics from Call Me and said, I've been rolled in designer sheets and I've had enough. But when I first saw American Gigolo, I realized a couple of things about it. I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs about it. I finally watched Schrader's stylish, uneven American Gigolo years after my Catboy experience, well beyond the decorator's extinguished gaze and my stint as a by-the-hour escort. The film has served as a cultural reference point for male sex workers for decades, just not for me, even while I was one. I watched it on a streaming service from the co-op I'd purchased with the money in the matured annuity my lesbian financial planner had wisely recommended. I was relieved that I didn't see it when I was 16. Watching through the final scene of an imprisoned gigolo saved by his love-struck client, it hit me that the film was telling a gay story with straight characters and a happily ever after ending for mainstream audiences. I cracked up when Julian, the gigolo character, meets up with his gay pimp and alludes to dalliances with men while insisting that he doesn't do fag jobs anymore. What hustler in the history of the world has moved up from gay to straight? It painted an absurd picture of me and my fellow hustlers in some minor league bullpen, just waiting to get called up into the heterosexual majors. Um, yeah. So I just I just like to mention that like that that movie is a kind of canonical depiction of male sex work. Like
Mhm.
it's the first reference point for a lot of, of US born people of certain generations. And what I found when I finally watched it only a few years back is that it's a kind of straight wash gay narrative where
Mhm.
the gays are villainized and the redemption of the sex of the gigolo is through his female client.
Right. Right. Mhm.
So I'm trying to do a little better than that.
Well, yeah.
I, I say you are. All right. Are you ready for a new list of get to know you questions? And we realized
Sure.
last minute that you've already seen this year's, so you're going to get a different list.
Oh, good, good, good. Because I was like, yeah, I've been through this list, but
Yes, you
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
let's
yeah. So I pulled an
surprise
old one
me.
out. So we're going to shake
Okay.
the dust off of it and we're going to go with this. So, in the year of wow, now for you, what one word describes your favorite food?
Um, carby. I like carbs.
Carb
I like
laden. It's hyphenated.
carb carb laden. I like carbs. We talked about this on my first visit. I like pastries. It's December now, so I'm in a like heavy panettone era.
Nice.
Ah, okay. All right. All right. Well, your favorite entertainment genre.
Entertainment. I think I like film. I think I like film.
Okay. All right. Where are you on the spectrum of mundane versus magical?
Oh, oh, where am I on the spectrum of mundane versus magical? I am um I have a I have a mundane life with magical outcomes.
There you go. There you go.
Lovely.
See? All right. Well, your preferred level of PDA.
I'm not the best at PDA. I'm not the best at that. I like DAs in the home or in private or in dark rooms, but not in public. Yeah. I'm an imprinted Gen Xer who still recoils at the thought of like
Right,
gay
right,
affection
right.
being
Yeah, get a
displayed on the
room.
street. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. The environment where you relax the most.
Relax the most. I feel like it's probably in bed with my partner. Yeah,
Okay.
not just sleeping, like not like
Hmm.
Yeah.
wrestling, just sleeping. Yeah.
Okay.
Or like resting or just like
Right.
lying next to
Right.
each other doing our own things.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Your preferred beverage.
It's got to be coffee. Yeah.
Iced or
Good New
hot?
Yorker. Good New
Coffee and
Yorker.
pastries. Coffee and pastries.
Okay. Iced or hot?
Yes.
Yes.
I I drink a lot of like cold coffee. Like I
Right.
make hot coffee, I have one cup and then there's more because I have a giant espresso maker. And then I drink like cold. It doesn't have to be iced from Starbucks. It can just be
Right. Right.
old
Right.
coffee.
Right. Okay. Where do you fall on the scale of youthful naivete versus the wisdom of experience?
Well, I mean, I processed a lot of my naivete in this book. So like, let's see what happens when it comes
So
out.
you're
If
like
I
the
like,
old Chinese mystic up in the mountains, up in the misty mountains.
let's see if I can summon that wisdom when I'm like, on the road with it and talking about it.
There you go.
This is the first time I'm live talking about it. I've done a couple of like Substacks about it, but this is the first time I'm live talking about it. So this is a
Okay.
rehearsal and a first stab at like coherently discussing my own book, which is a different act than writing a book.
Yes.
Yep. 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 Well, in that vein, choose amongst your children. What's your favorite fictional character?
I do have a favorite fictional character. I have one. I'm gonna make the selection from published fictional characters.
Fine. Absolutely.
I have a story that's called Raunch Daddy, which is about a naive young hustler who encounters the titular Raunch Daddy, who is a Mexican novelist with a nose for, you know, uh, uh, bodily scent. And his name is Nico in the story. And I wrote it in a diaristic manner, so it's like it's a lot of diary entries. It's not an actual experience I had, but it's based on a lot of my experience. And I love the earnestness and the naivete he brings to this relationship.
Right.
And he
Right.
falls in love, which is always
Oh, there you
nice.
go. There you go.
Nice.
That's
And he
the
gets his
Disney
heart
part of the story.
and he gets his heart broken, which is
Oh,
also
okay.
nice.
So kind of Disney. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, final question. Your favorite mode of travel?
I love trains mostly. I fly a
So
lot.
many of our guests have said that.
Hmm.
I mean, and we can talk about the US train system and Amtrak and funding and all that, but I still love trains. I love taking a train. I'm taking a train when I go on my next business trip. I'm purposefully flying to a hub nearby and taking a 2 hour train ride to get to where I'm going.
Nice.
I like taking trains all over the Northeast. I fly a lot because my husband is a flight attendant, so I get those benefits, but I really love trains.
Nice.
I get a lot of writing done on trains.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Hmm.
I like commuter trains too. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to
Oh
go.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But intermodal, yeah, I'm fairly obsessed with transportation logistics.
Cool. Very cool.
Nice.
So the episode of I Love Lucy where they're planning to go to California is one of your favorite episodes, right?
I mean,
Where she
nothing
has
beats
the
the
map where they're going. They have to cross
yeah,
through New York 4 times before they can even
nothing
leave the state.
on par with the chocolate factory one.
Right, right, right.
Nice. Awesome. Well, you made it through the list.
Great. Yeah, that's a good list. I liked your other
Thanks.
list, but I like this list too. Yeah.
Thanks. So, as you're gearing up for this book's release, do you have other appearances and or dates you want people to know about?
So yeah, this whole period now is like me trying to be my own publicist since I don't have a publicist. And this is an independent press, another small independent press where
Hmm.
they're very enthusiastic and they're very supportive, but they don't have like the juggernaut behind them like an author
Mm-hmm.
with one of the big five has.
Right.
So I do have some appearances lined up. My first reading from this book will be, and I will have advanced copies, is February 19th at the Bureau of General Service Queer Division. It's part of a series put on by Publishing Triangle. I
Nice.
also am going to be at Saints and Sinners again in March. Um, I'm also going to be in at the Rainbow Book Fair, which is May this year, May 10th, I believe, back in New York this year. I'm
Hmm.
definitely returning to Chicago. I did a joint reading in Chicago at the Leather Archives and Museum, which was one of my favorite favorite experiences on the mini tour I was on for my last book. So I'll
Nice.
definitely be returning to Chicago for a reading. And then more to come. There's a lot of a couple other podcasts in the works and a couple of other Substack uh appearances that
Nice.
are coming up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, where should people go to watch for those updates?
They can go to my website, which is my name, dalecorvino.com. They can go to my socials. I'm off Twitter. I bugged off of Twitter after
Us too.
I don't remember what was the driver, but it was like sometime over the summer. But I'm now on, and I honestly don't know what I'm doing on any of these platforms, but I'm just trudging along like everybody else. Still on Facebook. It's my second account because my first one got shut down.
Oh,
Still on
I think I
Instagram.
send us the new link. I don't think I have it.
I think you do.
Okay.
It was a while back. Threads and Blue Sky. So yeah,
We'll promote
Facebook,
you.
Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky.
All right, we'll promote you on all of them.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you guys. I really do enjoy our conversations. And it's great that you give us queer writers this platform.
Hey, it's two part goal on our part. One, we want to provide an archive or a repository for people to come find their next favorite author. Come
Yes.
come to our site, search a genre, and you'll get every author we've interviewed in that genre.
Right.
But
Yeah,
also, especially in these weird political times, we want to archive our queer voices so they don't get taken away.
absolutely. Yep.
So
If
thank
it's in
you.
the cloud, it can't go away.
Right.
Yes.
Somebody's got it.
So thank you for coming back and talking with us.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, folks, we're at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.